From the heart of Wrexham, welcome to the Hope Street Church podcast. For more information of how to get involved, stay tuned until the end of the episode.
First of all, I just wanted to introduce you to Kev and Lysney and allow them to tell a little bit of their story, because certainly for me, you have modelled something over these last nearly couple of years, that I believe has really shaped who we are as a church community. But would you, first of all, tell us a little bit, you went through a very painful situation nearly a couple of years ago. Tell us a little bit what happened.
Okay, so on the 22nd of November 2021, we lost our beautiful, kind, loving daughter, Kirsten, at the age of 14. In the 2 years leading up to her passing, she'd suffered with chronic fatigue syndrome, or ME, which was a daily struggle and a challenge for her and for us as a family in how to support her. We were muddling through, but by the September-October of 2021, she was practically housebound and very limited in what she could actually do by herself. And it was heartbreaking to watch that situation. But then in November, she became quite unwell quite quickly. And after 24 hours of back and forth to the GPs, we were admitted into the children's ward at the Myler Hospital, where she very quickly deteriorated. They ran a whole host of tests and discovered that she had leukemia. Kirsten and I were rushed up to Alderhay early hours of Friday morning, and sadly her condition deteriorated en route. By the time we made it up to Alderhay, she was admitted into the intensive care unit. And she was sedated and on a ventilator. And they discovered that the leukemia had caused brain bleeds. We met with several different doctors, including a neurosurgeon, who basically told us to prepare ourselves for the worst. We didn't lose hope, though, and we leaned on our family here and Christians throughout the world we knew were praying for her a healing, praying for a miraculous healing. But more than that, we know that they were praying for us as a family and upholding us as a family as we walked the most difficult path that I've ever walked. We had the weekend at Alderhay, where she was relatively stable but very seriously ill in intensive care. But then the Monday she took a turn for the worse. They scanned her brain again and discovered that the brain bleeds had actually worsened, and they'd caused the one side of her brain had been completely blocked off, and they told us that there was no way that she could come back from that. So we got a chance to say our goodbyes, and Kirsten passed in the intensive care unit at Alderhay on Monday the 22nd of November 2021 in the evening.
Thank you, Lysney. We were obviously really praying as a community very much during that time, but tell us a little bit about how you experienced God during that time.
I think for me, obviously, this was I describe it as a storm. This was sort of the fiercest storm of our lives. But we never felt abandoned by God. We always felt him close to us. That the psalmist uses this phrase, that he hid me under the shadow of his wings. And I felt that very much the whole time we were in Alderhay and beyond. Just want to take you back to that Friday morning, and Lindsay had gone ahead with Kirsten in the ambulance to Alderhay, and I'd arrived the Friday morning. And as I entered the room where Kirsten was and just saw my little girl in this intensive care bed with all wires and leads coming out from everywhere and hooked up to these sort of hospital beige machines. They're all whirring and bleeping and flashing. And I just stood there and just was completely overwhelmed by the situation. I just couldn't help but just cry. And these tears just flowed from me. I pulled my heart out in that moment. And I realized that that in that moment, those cries were a prayer. They became a prayer to God, and a prayer without words, and probably the most powerful prayer that I've ever prayed in my life. I later read Psalm 56 and verse 8, and it says about, God keeps a record of our tears. And, I was amazed really as I read that. Not only does that mean that God knows every single tear we've ever shed, but that means that they have value to God. And I could just sort of picture that my tears were sort of leaving behind tiny flecks of gold. And almost that my tears, the tracks of my tears became a sort of a roadmap of my life before God.
Yeah, Lindsay.
I think for me, in that spending that weekend in that hospital room with Kirsten, I felt God so tangibly close. As Kev said, we never once felt abandoned or forsaken. And we know that there were so many people praying for us, and we know that that was part of it. People's prayers were literally holding us up. And we just felt God so really close to us. And when it came for the time when they switched off all the machines, and we decided, we'd been playing worship music throughout, and we decided we were going to play the UK Blessing over Kirsten. And we had the song playing, didn't we? And I remember being kind of curled up on the pillow with her, stroking her head, and we were singing the song. And she passed doing that song, and I've heard people talk about there being a thin place, about the heaven and earth being just very close. And it really, at that point, just felt that heaven wasn't this distant place. It was really close. And it felt that as we were playing this and singing this over her, and declaring it over her, really, that God was swooping down to collect her and to take her back to heaven. And we really felt that veil of heaven and earth being so close.
Thank you. The grief is obviously something that is very real with you every day. And as I said right at the beginning, this sense of, if you look through the Psalms, as we've been doing in these last few weeks, about half of the Psalms contain lament. They've got, sometimes we find it difficult to bring our questions and think that broken part to God, but you've really walked that out, and I think you've modelled something in your vulnerability over this last season. So tell us a little bit what kind of lament and this model of that we see in the Psalms of worship, including lament. What has that meant to you over this last period?
I think for me, there's a verse in the Bible that says God draws close to the brokenhearted. And I've just really felt that. And that's freed me up to just be real before God. God knows anyway. Even if we try and hide how we're feeling, God knows our hearts. So God knows that my heart is broken. God knows that it's shattered. God knows my pain. But being able to actually bring that before God in prayer and in worship, I think is powerful. I feel that God doesn't want us, whatever situation or circumstance we're going through, he doesn't want us to pretend that it's all okay when it's not. He wants us to be real. He wants our hearts. And yeah, there's vulnerability in that, but actually if we're vulnerable before God, he will meet us. He will, as Kev said, you know, put his wing over us. He will shadow us. He will be with us. Yeah.
Yeah, I think as we were preparing for this, you said something significant the other day, Lindsay. You said, God wants us to worship him with all our heart, even if that's a broken heart. And I think he just invites us to be real, to be true before him. And the amazing thing is that you know, the hope and the lament and the pain and the praise can all coexist at the same time.
Yeah. And one of the ways that you've responded to the tragedy that you've gone through has actually been in creating Boxes of Sunshine. Tell us a little bit about what that is, why you're doing it, and about Friday.
Okay, so very soon after Kirsten passed, we had a conversation about we wanted to do something to honour her memory. We wanted to do something to keep her legacy alive. And although Kirsten died of leukemia, as I mentioned, she'd suffered for 2 years with chronic fatigue syndrome. So we decided that we wanted to do something to help young people who suffer with a chronic illness, who have a disability or something that stops them leading what would be classed as a reasonably normal life. So we set up a charity called Boxes of Sunshine. And we send out gift boxes, postal gift boxes to chronically ill young people throughout the UK. Everything in the gift boxes are inspired by Kirsten, things that she loved, things that made her smile, things that helped her with her living with the chronic illness. And we send these out just to bring a smile to these young people's faces, to let them know that they're not on their own, that there are people that care for them, people that love them, people that are cheering them on, and, you know, and for the families as well to know they're not on their own.
So if you would like to come and hear more about the Boxes of Sunshine and a little bit more about their story, this coming Friday, 7:30 here.
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock here. You'd be so welcome to come. We would love to work out ways that we can support what these guys are doing, that God does make things beautiful in his time, and he will bring good out even in the midst of the brokenness and the tears. So thank you so much for sharing your story. Why don't we give them a round of applause? We're just going to take a pause for like 1 minute as we reset. Mike is going to come and speak to us from the Psalms about lament for all of us. But let's just have a moment, because that story, I'm sure, will have touched many of us.
Thank you for listening to the Hope Street podcast. We're a church in Wrexham with a vision to be a people of hope, following Jesus and giving ourselves away to see Wrexham renewed. To find out more, head to our website, hopestreet.church, or follow us on social media.